I'd like to implement some nice bike infrastructure here in Meridian, but I don't want to just upgrade all the existing roads with bike lanes. That would be too easy and not politically feasible in a city that still loves the almighty automobile and parking lots. So instead, we need to get creative with some fully dedicated bike highways based on the bike traffic data tools now available within cities too. And as usual, you can grab this Meridian save file for free over on my Patreon, and consider subscribing if you haven't already to not miss out on upcoming content. Anyways, let's dive in. And we're going to start by mapping out a downtown district so we can play around with the new bike policies. Yeah, I guess I couldn't really help myself because one planned district turned into 3. So I'll say downtown is still pretty sizable and by a good margin the densest part of town. But given the pretty unique layout of this segment of the inner city area, I decided to name it Traders Row, and I imagine that there's some narrative amongst this area in terms of trading and all the row housing. Very creative, I know. Moving further west, we now have both River Bend and River Cross, obviously referencing the Meridian River that cuts through town. Now, the reason I need to map out some districts, besides all the narrative purposes that I enjoy so much, is that currently bikes are just taking up entire traffic lanes in downtown. And while I will give them that they do bike pretty fast, it's all just a little dangerous and probably not the best way to accommodate biking. So what we can do now that we have districts is that we can enable the bicycle traffic restriction policy. This will effectively forbid cyclists from utilizing the existing road networks, but it's also going to completely forbid biking in downtown Meridian. The case being that we don't have any proper bike infrastructure that the cyclists can use instead of the road network. So be careful with enabling this one. We gotta make sure that we have alternative paths for them. And something else we're also gonna do when we're ready to enable this is we're going to also enable the Urban Cycling Initiative, which is just going to further promote more bicycle use. We can enable both of these policies at the same time, which basically just means that we want you to bike, but you gotta use the dedicated infrastructure. So to better accommodate bikes, we need an overview of which parts of the city, which specific streets and avenues they utilize the most. And fortunately, we get some nice UI features that we can utilize to get that overview. Clicking on bicycles, this is going to be the default view, but what you'll actually need to do is enable the bicycle traffic volume, because this map tells us nothing. Enabling this though will provide a color gradient going from gray through orange to purple, which basically just showcases how high the bicycle traffic volume is for that particular street. So we'll get back to this in 5 seconds when I've just let the simulation run for a little while and some of the bike traffic to really settle in. And it seems we can make a few pretty sound observations from this map mode now that things have settled down a little bit. So I think the first general note is that due to the mixed use nature of downtown and it being home to 3,500 residents and more than 1,000 workplaces, this is just a busy area that encourages the commuting through bikes or walking. So some segments of downtown should definitely have proper infrastructure in place to accommodate this. Additionally, bike use in Riverbend is also pretty decent, especially this heavy used node alongside Arborview Street. And this is probably because people need to reach the city high school. Now it gets really cool when we stack the current bicycle traffic volume overlay with the traffic routes overlay, because if we enable this, we get an overall overview of all the places that people commute from to reach the high school, but more specifically, we also get a bit of insight into the modes of transportation with these yellow lines indicating bike traffic. So judging by this, a majority of bike traffic trying to reach the high school travels alongside this corridor. They move down Caraway Street, they make a right turn alongside Goldenrod Street, they make a left turn through this roundabout to get to Arbory Street and get to their location. Another interesting question this poses to us as the honorable, non-corruptible city officials of Meridian is whether a direct bike integration between Rivercross and Riverbend would result in a lot of bike traffic. Because currently that connection isn't possible because these highways don't allow for any bike traffic at all. They do allow for pedestrian traffic though, and we see people actively making this commute on foot. And we also see quite a bit of traffic within Rivercross, mainly the high density areas. The very same point can be made for the connection between South Landing and Riverbend, although the situation is a little different because we don't see any localized biking within South Landing. It should be noted though that this is purely a residential district, so even with some high density areas it doesn't have any localized shopping centers, while on the flip side Rivercross do have access to this small kind of high street shopping situation. I do feel kind of bad for the very first implementation in this bike focused video to be a slight change to the road situation here, but this roundabout has to go and be replaced by one at this segment instead because this is looking terrible. Although this helped a little bit, we were instantly reminded by why we're actually doing this video, because it's actually the pedestrian traffic here that's messing everything up. So I think we're going to try adding the divided wide pedestrian bicycle path as an overpass segment crossing above the Meridian River and this busy junction. So I think I'm gonna disable all snapping, and hopefully an elevation of 625 is sufficient to cross the road segment here, so it doesn't look super wonky. But yeah, no anarchy enabled, so we'll see. I mean, everyone is running an electric bike these days, so 8%, that isn't too bad, is it? We're gonna try this, and then what we're going to do is we're also going to make a dedicated stop here so that it actually crosses into the higher density areas. Yeah, that should be more than manageable, and a pretty nice aesthetic for this combined pathway as well. Now over here, I think we're running into some slight issues in terms of space. So yeah, let's get rid of at least a few of these segments and then probably convert this into the dual purpose lane as well. I've just quickly paused the game because the bridge does seem to be an immediate success with the pedestrian traffic at the very least, which should alleviate some of this mess. But we're also seeing the very first bikes now. We have Ember Keats, and Ember is making their way towards the city high school. So this is perfect. It seems like providing this connection was all it took for some actual bikes to spawn within South Landing. While the bike traffic within the district apparently isn't enough for any of the roads to change the color scheme, we actually do see some of the routes mapped out here from the city high school, so it's really nice being able to follow this in real time. And traffic has actually started to flow much better now that the amount of pedestrians cluttering up this roundabout is greatly reduced. I have, however, noted what I think might be a bit of a technical issue in terms of functionality, because I don't think the bikes can make this. Oh, they can actually make the crossing here, but it turns into this kind of weird motion where they kind of take up a ton of the road to make this. And I think it's because this is not a direct crossing, it's just connected to each of these sidewalks, and then you can utilize this crossing, or the bikes, as we can see, have to do something a little funky. So I think we're actually going to pause and see if we can fix this, because I do imagine that we'll be able to utilize this space at the middle section of this road segment to actually move fully across. Well, I'm hopeful at least. So let's just see how we can achieve this. I think we're going to add an additional node here because I don't mind this segment. Then we'll delete this node and probably use Can we use the complex curve tool here? I think we might just be able to. So we'll branch out at 180. We'll move up a bit. Actually, maybe no snapping. And then we'll move. Yeah, it seems to actually generate a crossing, so I'm hopeful this might work. And then we just about need to make it across to the other side, because we gotta be careful about the incline here. So let's see if we can go 180 and snap down here and connect. So that is 7.6%, which is even better than before. Now, hopefully from a visual perspective, it doesn't look wonky, and that doesn't seem to be the case. Perfect. Now we do need to do a bit of cleanup of the existing crossings. So let's get rid of this one, and potentially this one instead as well, because there is quite a bit of through traffic here. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it ideal, but it did solve the immediate issue. Because bikes and electric scooters are actually just making the direct crossing now. I would love for a sort of visual to actually represent that crossing. That would be really nice. And this guy is just a complete anarchist. I gotta admit, the more I look at this, the more I wonder whether we should make this transition even more seamless. An initial hunch might be to actually just continue the elevated segment to also cross this small road, but I think that might look like a little out of place. I don't want to have too many of these bulky elevated segments. It looks a little, I don't know, spacey. So I think a more realistic approach would actually be to cut this connection entirely, because I wouldn't mind the traffic having to feed out onto like the main part of Garland Drive, which is meant to be a high volume, high speed solution. And then to compensate, we'll just make sure that you can actually make a left here from Garland Drive to get onto like the main avenue moving through downtown. Although, what if we made the world's smallest jog handle? A jog handle would essentially try to do is make sure you don't have to make this a left turn here cutting through traffic. So yeah, I'm actually not sure if it makes any sense at all at this particular location, but it is a fun concept. We've just been implementing it in Riverview. It's such a fun thing to make. So why not? Why not just give it a go? Let's try a jog handle. So we'll do this. So this is actually going to just be a straight crossing now, and you're going to have to use this lane if you want to turn left. And then we're going to disallow this left turn. And then ideally, we also want to disallow this left turn. Now this obviously changes the functionality of this intersection quite a bit, but it does seem like most traffic is actually making its westbound direction alongside Garland Drive. Which is also why I initially made sure to have 2 lanes in that direction. And it makes sense, much of the traffic is trying to reach the heavily populated area of Rivercross or making its way to the port, with the main entrance being down here. Well, I can't say I'm not having fun with this. This is a whole new world opening up for our city building endeavors. Yeah, this is fun and a bit chaotic, but I can turn anything into chaos, I think is the conclusion by now, if you watch my content. I'm gonna add a few flowers here, try to make it look a little nicer. This is nice. Like, all my self-deprecating stuff aside, this feels nice. And it is like super functional. Just look at how much the traffic has been alleviated here. It was a complete mess before we invested some funds into this overpass solution. And I think a really nice thing as well is that it actually ties into this segment that we highlighted before, the very busy bike corridor of Goldenrod moving into Arborview. Just gonna have a look to see if that is still very much the case. And it does seem so, and it is probably still, yeah, a ton of bike traffic funneling down Goldenrod Street to reach the high school. It's also pretty obvious though that this connection here just doesn't work, and I think we're gonna start with some road demolishing, because this small one-way lane making its way to a crossing right here seems like a recipe for disaster. So once again, we're going to prioritize bikes of all things. I'm just gonna add a quick little note here and get rid of this segment and this one as well. And yeah, what are we gonna do here? I'm kinda tempted to just make this a small roundabout. And you are going to point out that technically you can't actually make your way back because it's one way, but it doesn't really seem to matter for citizens, so let's just assume they can. Yeah, if we're about to actually be really serious about this bike superhighway, we need to fix this crossing entirely as well, just like we did over here. But instead of making an overpass, I'd rather just kind of make an underpass. Because if we kind of halt this construction before the owners or investors lose too much money, we might be able to turn this little segment of Goldenrod Street into an overpass and dig the superhighway underneath. I think it's worth a shot, so we'll make sure to add an additional node here. Then we need to get rid of some of this, but not... Yeah, actually, we can snap to this segment, I think. Then we need to do a tiny bit of terraforming. So the target height here is 19 meters above water surface level, I assume. Can I drop that? I can drop that to 10, which is probably a little too low. So if I instead right click at, oh, let's see, can we kind of squeeze it and do 13, and then just see if we can bridge our way across 13 meters. Yeah, so unfortunately 13 meters prompts not an overpass, but just quaysides. We probably need to go just a little lower then. Okay, we're going to employ a different strategy here. We're going to get the overpass completed while the canyon is, yeah, a little canyon, and then we're going to try to terraform the 12 meters afterwards. I think this might just work. We might even be able to get a bit more height on it. Great, then we'll need to slope the terrain out so that the slope isn't too steep for our cyclists and pedestrians alike. Yeah, this is all one big experiment, but we'll see how it looks. So with the complex curve tool, we'll branch out from this existing segment, then we will click once about here, disable some snapping for a bit more freedom. We'll click once more and then move. Do I have to actually? I don't actually have to have all that much of a curve on here, but this is 6.7%, so it's actually a little less steep than the overpass segment we built, which is perfect, I think. So let's bring this up and see if we can get down to at least like 7.5, so that this slope is also very easy to work with. And have a look. I mean, that is pretty cool. Probably needs like a little bit of terraforming just to kind of clean up the edges and maybe some trees and whatnot. As we're getting really close to the high school now, I think it's time we move the network onto the actual road segments. So let's just commit to a double bicycle lane upgrade for at least the majority of Arborview's stretch. A cool graphical feature is how it also adds the dedicated segment to the roundabouts. That looks fantastic, but it's going to look even greater because if you pick the two-way bicycle path and we kind of split this up and connect this to the roundabout, it is going to look fantastic. So 180, we click once, disable snapping for full freedom, and just look at that transition. It's not the most safest thing if you're a pedestrian at least, but it is really cool how the game will automatically paint in the necessary line work for this to make sense. The flexibility is just fantastic to work with, basically. I also just wanna maybe connect this up to the sidewalk, and we'll just add a quick connection here as well for good measure. And it is seeing immediate use, which is a really cool thing. Although for some reason this bloke just used it to make a U-turn, but it is going to work. I'm confident. We got someone here. Is let's see, Patsy Copeland, moving to the city high school. So let's just see how Patsy navigates this roundabout. She stops for the bike and moves through. That is awesome. She should also be utilizing the existing parking up here, depending on when she enters the high school, mind you. There's a bike rack here with a few empty spots. We definitely need to add some bike dedicated parking as well if we're serious about this. But let's continue onwards with expanding the network first. Before we add additional upgrades, can I just quickly rant about how this game decides what a road is? Because this is now Ashford Street, so one thing is that its name has definitely changed a couple of times during the last 10 minutes of recording this. But another much more pressing issue is the fact that somehow Ashford Street makes up half the tarmac here in downtown. Like, I don't even know how to realistically fix this, and it might be a minor thing to some people, but as I'm someone who likes to reference streets by their actual names to give like a sense of where we are and what we're working with, and who also likes to occasionally name streets, this is super annoying. Either way, let's just do a quick UI checkup once again to see if Ashford Street is still part of the busy traffic corridor. And that very much seems to be the case. So much so, in fact, that we're now starting to see the first glimpses of purple in downtown. So it really does seem like there is a connection running somewhat down here and all the way out to Traders Row. So as a start, we should probably just dedicate, I want to say Ashford Street, but that's literally half the city, this road here to have dedicated bike lanes. I think that would be a decent start. And a positive here in terms of like making realistic arguments for and against as city planners. Since this is a asymmetrical 2x1, there is no on-street parking that we would be disrupting by adding bike lanes. And can I just praise the developers for actually enabling the bike lane upgrade on this road segment, because it does make the sidewalk a lot more narrow. But it's just nice having the flexibility, is what I'm trying to say. We're going to upgrade the overpass as well as this stretch between the two roundabouts as well, but I do wonder if it would be equally efficient to add actual, I guess you would say, on and off ramps to the bike superhighway. I mean, I think it's worth a shot at least. So these are the one-way bicycle paths, because the the paths here alongside the street are one directional as well and just follow the general direction of the traffic. So let's just see if we can, actually make this look all right, or if it's going to be super weird. So I don't think I'm gonna get a fancy graphic by making this direct connection, and it might cause an issue or two, but we're just gonna try. And then as for this segment here, we're gonna move as close to this roundabout as we possibly can, because I don't want to have any weird like shifts in terrain, which you can kind of see is the case here. So maybe just get rid of this roundabout altogether. I was curious to see if anyone would actually use this, but it does seem like Mr. Roydon Salazar is utilizing our bike on-ramp, and that connection seemed pretty seamless, so that's nice. I haven't seen anyone use this segment yet though, but I would argue that in terms of distance and in terms of safety, it's better to get off here than continuing through this segment. Speaking of safety, we might even try to force people onto the superhighway. So to achieve that, what if we... Things are getting wacky, I know. What if we add in another ramp? We obviously need that, because you need to be able to get to this segment and move into downtown if you're coming from the city high school. And then we just downgrade this, basically removing the dedicated bike infrastructure, or sorry, the dedicated bike lanes. While we wait for things to pick up and this to hopefully function, I did notice that this is technically a crossing, but it's not very pedestrian and bike friendly. People are like trying to run across here, which makes a ton of sense. So let's do our duty and wait for the ambulance to pass, then add a dedicated crosswalk and traffic lights. By this point, I don't even care if this thing works. It is so cool, it's gotta stay. It's time for a little experiment just to see how pathfinding is actually calculated and how cyclists are going to prioritize bike infrastructure without any of the policies enabled. So this is Ophelia Parker, and she's currently here on Arborview Street trying to make it home to 51 Blackthorn Lane. If this is not the house of a group of Death Eaters, I don't know what this address is. Oh, and the house fits the bill as well, aesthetically. Anyways, it's a really nice looking old row house in the very heart of downtown. Now, Ophelia is taking, I guess the shortest route is the only thing she cares about, because she is going to ride directly on a traffic lane and then move through this parking lot serving this shopping center and then make a crossing here. But we have valuable intel or knowledge telling us that Dunhaven Street is seeing quite a bit of bike traffic. So I wonder if she would be willing to recalculate her route without any policy changes if I just upgrade this segment of Dunhaven Street to have dedicated bike lanes. So would she be willing to get onto our bike superhighway, move underneath the never-ending Ashford Street, make a left turn here and then be able to turn left by this intersection, allowing her to utilize dedicated infrastructure for like the majority of the way home? There's only one way to find out. We're of course going to follow her around. Ophelia, I am counting on you. Make the right choice. Oh, damn it. I'm going to blame Ophelia for roughening up a bit and adding some actual bicycle restrictions to a few of the streets in downtown. Because my goal is not to add dedicated bike lanes everywhere. I wouldn't like the look of it. It's going to remove all the street side parking. And realistically, when you think about it, in most cities, bike-forward politicians have to literally fight for every single mile of dedicated bike infrastructure that they want the city to spend even a dime on. And for every mile that's implemented, there's like 1,000 people opposing it. Trying to use a little more data for the next decision, the restriction we just implemented is very clearly seen in Simon's ride home. Because utilizing her bike, she needs to get to 159 Bay Drive, and we can see that in the distance. It's this high-rise on the eastern end of downtown. Now, interestingly, she's going to utilize Bay Drive for the majority of this stretch. And I think it's because she can't cut directly through this segment of Arborview Street. What this tells me at least is that we need to somehow compensate for the newly implemented restrictions. The easiest solution would just be to add dedicated bike lanes throughout Bay Drive, but this is like the main arterial, or rather the main ring road surrounding the inner city areas. It has 4 lanes of high-speed traffic, so I'd rather just not. We're fortunate though in that we have a lot of recreational space between Bay Drive and the edge of downtown, so we should easily be able to convert some of the pedestrianized stuff here into also accommodating bike traffic. Just a quick intermission here. The on and off ramps actually work. What a beautiful thing in motion. So satisfying. And this new bike highway is actually going to be surprisingly tricky to implement due to what I think is a bit of an oversight in the bike patch. And that's the fact that we don't get any bike infrastructure integration with the existing narrow or wide pedestrian streets, which just seems like a bit of a miss. It would be awesome to just enter the road upgrades menu and add some dedicated bike lanes to these segments, since they already dedicate themselves to non-vehicle traffic. And I think this is an issue because these are of course zonable. So in this particular instance, Dale Street, which is just a pedestrian street, is actually vital for this area because much of the commercial establishments are facing it. If I run a two-way bicycle path parallel to this pedestrianized road, which I think would make sense from like a urban planning point of view, I am essentially going to restrict zoning to the side of this pedestrian road that doesn't have the bike lane. And it's obviously going to take up a little more space than just being able to add it within this actual segment. An additional issue that this restriction presents us is that while you're able to carefully squeeze in some bike paths into the same traffic crossing node, I know this is actually possible. There you go. That's not possible everywhere. I don't think that, I'm just gonna place this, I don't think that's gonna be a possibility over here because it's a straight pedestrian street cutting through. Yeah, this is not gonna work. And what this essentially would force us to do is to add another crossing within a very tight space in the first place, which is just not very ideal. Now, I think one way we can kind of get by this issue within this specific location is to basically downgrade this segment to a narrow pedestrian segment, because apparently we can make the straight crossing then, because I guess the node is just smaller. I know this is a little technical, but I think it's worthwhile to investigate. So I think in this case, I can grab a straight segment and just move very close. And yeah, it's going to allow me to move straight through, and this is going to be a part of the same node, so it's not gonna cause weird traffic hiccups. And then over here, it's probably going to be much easier to actually navigate this node, because we are just going to continue this straight segment directly into the node, and then we're going to, we'll have to do something here where we kind of, I guess we move through down here or something. Let's add a crossing, then we'll quickly make a left turn, we'll move directly up, and then we should be able to branch in to this node here, just like that. Can we already see this in effect? I don't know if any of these people are actually meant to go in this direction, but we'll test. Oh, this is interesting. I'm starting to feel weird about the previous 4 minutes of recording. To be fair, it's still not ideal because we can't add the dedicated bike lanes, and it doesn't seem like the bikes want to prioritize pedestrian streets either. At least Mason here and the bikes we just saw very quickly choose to prioritize the actual bike path, which I guess makes sense. Anyways, let's get this section here connected directly to the Arborview Street roundabout. And then I just quickly need to do something that I should have done a while ago. Why not just enable the urban cycling initiative throughout, so that we can at the very least prioritize bicyclists before we then potentially ban them from utilizing regular streets. Alright, so we've already talked a bit about the political side of bike infrastructure here in Meridian, where the main opponents in City Council will often point to a reduction in surface parking as a no-go. And of course we do see that take effect when we add dedicated bike lanes, because, you know, the surface parking is usually the best place you can grab space from. Now, fortunately, we do have Camellia Street running north-south through downtown, and it is a one-way street with plenty of existing parking, so much so that I'm pretty confident we can push through at least a one-lane bike path on one side of the street, because it wouldn't reduce the total capacity all that much. So let's get this added, and we can do that by selecting the singular bicycle lane. Interestingly, we can't actually control the direction of this one direction bicycle lane, so that seems to just be hard-coded to whatever side of the road it's attached to. which effectively means that in this particular instance, the bike traffic is actually in the opposite direction of the cars. Now, I don't necessarily mind that. It might even be great for safety because it's, you know, it's at least something that might increase visibility. But it does mean we have to be careful about the way we complete this loop, because we currently only allow dedicated bike traffic to move south and not north through downtown. So I think we'll need to convince the city council once more to give up a bit of parking. Of course, the compromise we're gonna sell this idea on is the fact that we're not going to take all the surface parking from Madison Street, only one side of it. And obviously it has to run in the opposite direction of the bike traffic here. So since this is moving north, sorry, not south, this has to move south. So it has to be on this side of the street. And then for good measure, let's make sure we complete the loop by adding an upgrade here as well. What we need now is a proper connection from both of these one-directional bike lanes to the quote-unquote highway. So we're just going to freeform a slightly curvy bit right here. Then we're going to break off into a one-directional segment, which is going to move its way over to this street and intersect into this node here for as few issues as possible. And then what are we gonna do here? Well, actually, we should probably just commit this upgrade throughout Camellia Street. Not sure why I started here. We should add this as well, yes. And then we can just turn this into a one-directional one altogether. Yeah, it is kind of an interesting look, isn't it? I'm hoping this will see plenty of use to justify the odd development pattern. Come on, get out of the way. There you go. So at least the transition here and the pathing seems to work perfectly fine, but as I mentioned earlier, the flexibility of the pathing and how things actually interact with each other is just a pleasure to work with, so it doesn't really surprise me all that much anymore. Also just want to make sure that the node setup we stressed so much about right here actually works. So I'm hoping that we'll see, developer mode, a seamless crossing as the light turn, and that does seem to be the case. I can't say with confidence that we're ready yet to enable the bicycle traffic restriction policy for downtown as well, because we certainly have a few spots we need to figure out, but I think we're getting fairly close. And I think as a start, we're going to return to Madison Street, because while this is a compromise definitely to continue allowing for some street side parking, as soon as Madison Street crosses the Garland Drive ring road, it basically turns into like a suburban corridor. And we can very visibly see this by the lack of on-street parking. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we can convince City Council, maybe through some red wine, an expensive hotel stay, to add dedicated bike lanes to either side of Madison Street and essentially continue that all the way out here to Cooperville. So that if you want to commute to Cooperville by biking, you can. So let's think for a second. We definitely need to also convert this segment so that you can realistically make a left turn here when you're moving into downtown, and then you can continue down Camellia Street if that's where your destination is taking you. So let's just move through. Probably just a few segments more. Oh, I can't. Oh, that's annoying. I think I'll have to redraw this and probably add some bike parking out here. And then let's assume that people are willing to walk the remainder of the distance, because I don't want dedicated bike lanes within our filthy, dirty industrial district. I think that's gonna look a little weird. So we're going to remove this road here, commit to the upgrade, and add our very first dedicated parking asset for bikes right here. We've got plenty of options, but I think we're gonna start with the small bicycle parking hall, because we can upgrade this with changing rooms. and additional space if we need it. But I think that changing rooms in particular are probably going to be popular if you've worked a rough, hard factory shift all day. So let's see, this one has 60 capacity currently, so we'll have to have a look at how that turns out, if that's something we need to upgrade. But let's just start by adding the changing rooms. Cool. Once again, utilizing the pretty powerful traffic route toggle, we already see some people making the commute out here. So at least 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5 agents by now, they are moving from pretty much all over town. So that's very nice to see. Although, oh man, this is quite the commute from South Landing to Cooperville. It is a very short distance in bird flight. But the bike ride is a little, yeah, it's something else. Maybe a dedicated bike pedestrian bridge here wouldn't be out of order. Let's do it. So we already have sidewalks alongside Garland Street, so that is pretty much serviceable. We even have extra dedicated paths down here, which is probably where we're going to branch off the bridge, so no need. We just need, well, I guess technically we could just add bike paths to Garland Street, because once again it has this suburban character. Like, that would be the easy way out. Let's see if we can do something a little more interesting. We're going to try with a dedicated bicycle path, and then we're going to abandon all hope if the nodes or segments just turn out to be like too small. This is just gonna be a little squished, isn't it? Can we move through here then? Like, can I branch out? How would this work? I don't think that'd be a problem. Like, there's so little traffic here, so why not? Never mind. We wouldn't want to upset our middle-class suburban voter base, so yeah, we're caving in and just committing to the slightly boring but super easy upgrade, which doesn't mess up zoning as a benefit. And we're now ready to branch off, because I think a crossing right here is going to be the most logical solution, so we can connect directly to the existing parking asset. So let's make this just a little interesting by not having this connect directly to the roundabout, but kind of split. So we're definitely having the bike lane connect directly to roundabout, because the lanes just look too sweet to not do that. So something like this, and then we'll just make sure this is connected directly to the sidewalk as well. It would be so very easy to just drag this combined segment across, but I'm kind of feeling that itch, you know, a bit of additional complexity. Not for the sake of complexity this time around. I think it might look like a bit of an art piece even. Maybe I'm just overselling it, but I'm gonna try something a little different and see if that's not gonna just make this a little more interesting to look at. I'm fairly certain it will. So I'm going to try and drag out 2 parallel bridges. Yeah, and hopefully that just looks more interesting. I wonder if I can... No, they only come in straight segments. I think that's fine, that's fine. Let's just cross above this, the Meridian River here. We're starting with the bike segment, like this, and then we're adding the identical bridge, but of course the pedestrian version. And I want to get real close here. Not too close, it is 2 bridges. I mean, that's the point. It is trying to look more interesting than it otherwise would. And this connection should be fairly easy, because it, yeah, once again, pathing, all that stuff, all that good stuff. For a good measure, we can easen the travel distance of pedestrians just a bit further, and probably add an additional crossing as well, just to accommodate their venture into Cooperville. So the commute now from South Landing to Cooperville should be done by bike or by foot, if you're physically able to, at the very least. I also imagine we can set up a pretty scenic bike ride throughout much of South Landing, since it is kind of poached on this hill here, and there's like plenty of foresty areas. Foresty areas. That's a term. Just a little flattening, just, you know, playing God just a little bit to make way for this bike network. There we go. We have contour lines enabled so that we can try to kind of make sure that the inclines aren't too wild here. And a direct connection, preferably with a crosswalk to this segment. We can probably connect up here to this fairly high density development as well. I don't think that is a bad start nor ending to a bike commute here in Meridian. It's pretty cozy looking. It is going to be very interesting to see if people will actually utilize it though. It took maybe 6 or 7 seconds for someone to embark on what I can only imagine to be a commute. I gotta make sure I don't lose out on this guy. Let's just quickly pause and see where Shay Thatcher is going. Destination Rage Stack Books. I assume that is... Oh, this is nice. Let's just follow this full on commute. Let's see, making their way safely across here. Oh, they're retired. So, okay. Oh, wow. Shay is making their way back to Garland Street to walk. Where is this place? Oh my. I mean, they are a senior, retired and all, so this is certainly good health-wise, but I guess it just kind of highlights a bit of an odd mechanic in terms of bike parking. I don't know if this is caused by the fact that this is the only dedicated bike parking structure we have and we already need to upgrade it. I mean, that might be the case, but even if that is the case, this is odd behavior, to say the least. Yeah, we definitely need more bike parking, but before we move further into the inner city to place some of just that, just having a little inspection by the bridge here, and it looks to be fairly effective. I mean, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic, a decent amount of bike traffic as well, and I can only assume that most of this traffic would otherwise have commuted by car, because the walking distance from South Landing to Cooperville is a little great. But then again, we are currently witnessing a retired senior making a walk from Cooperville into downtown, so what do I know? I feel like this transformation kind of started with the Meridian City High School, or at least the bike traffic trying to reach and depart this location. So what better place to actually build some bike parking, and I am even going to prioritize it above surface parking this time around. So I need some form of cool looking structure, although I might actually go with this underground parking facility has a ton of parking spots, so I think I'm going to reserve that for somewhere really close to downtown, and maybe just grab the large bicycle storage and get that placed, and then we'll compensate for the lost vehicle parking spots by adding the small parking building. We've now got a bit of empty space for an additional development, so let's add the art supply store signature building, which can just about fit within this lot. That looks like a hip place, perfect for city high schoolers. We'll probably need a couple of dedicated parking facilities in downtown, and then plenty of basic sidewalk parking for the bikes as well, so basically just bike racks. But starting with some more dedicated stuff, we've got a decent space here where I think we'll see plenty of usage. I think I might opt for the same small bicycle parking hall that we utilized way out in Cooperville. And then we're gonna be proper good guys and add in the changing rooms upgrades. And let's be a little future proofing here, adding in the additional storage space. Don't know if that's gonna see any use, but I have the money. We can actually add these dedicated bicycle stands to the pedestrian roads, which is a little interesting since no other upgrades are available. But they are kind of centered around the most busy walking path here. So I'm just going to try for good measure and then see if people insist on continuing to just kind of clip through them. Because that is going to be an eyesore I can't live with. So we'll see. We're already seeing a bit of use by Howard. And it actually looks like people are actively avoiding it, which I think is just fantastic. So I'm just gonna add a few more of these because I think that is a really cool looking addition to the pedestrian road here. Even though technically we've tried to discourage biking here. So yeah, there's no continuity in what I'm building. I don't know, continuity. That's the word, right? Is that a traffic jam signal showcasing a a bike traffic jam? Wow, that is a very cool feature indeed. And it seems like some of them are now reconsidering their pathing, making a U-turn and going back. That's pretty cool as well. Things are getting really busy here, and for a moment it seemed like there's sort of an induced demand situation with the bike parking, which may very well be the case, but I guess the quick conclusion is we need even more. I think the underground bike parking garage should be fairly close to like the epicenter of bike traffic here in Meridian, which seems to be around this crossing of the crossing of Ashford Street with Ashford Street. Oh, yikes. It's a 2x3 lot-sized building, and I'd hate having to remove one of the more defining buildings in this part of downtown. But I may just be able to kind of squeeze it in next to this corner lot here. And then we'll just quickly redevelop this into maybe a row house. And this one is going to be very interesting to track, because with a default of 452 spaces, I'd be very surprised if this needed an upgrade or got, completely filled up. Wait a minute. I just assumed, given the logo here, that this was an increase in capacity, but this is actually a side entrance, allowing cyclists to enter the underground parking hall through another entrance. Increased capacity for more bicycles. Okay, so that's also added, but just look at the radius in which we can add this. That is like, that's a really cool feature, this one. It's probably not suitable in our specific case, but that's nice nonetheless. Especially since I can only imagine that if you utilize the Anarchy mod, you can place this anywhere and it is still going to be a direct connection to the main parking garage. So you can like simulate like an underground network of bike tunnels all leading to the same main parking hub. Alright, so we've got the main facility up here, we have another facility on the northern end of downtown, and then we have Dunhaven Street kind of cutting through in between these two areas here. So maybe just a bunch of on-street bike racks here, since the sidewalk is pretty wide. I do imagine people will be able to like navigate around it. There's also the bike shelter, of course. I'm tempted to try and place a few of these and then once again just kind of watch whether the pedestrian traffic can actually navigate this stuff, or if they're just gonna walk through the like pillars and foundation. They actually avoid it. I mean, that is just so well implemented. That's just cool. Yeah. I don't want to have too many of those though. They look very distinctive, so I think we're just gonna go with some regular bicycle stands on either side of Dunhaven Street. We've also got these pretty distinctive looking large bicycle shelters. There's a smaller version as well. So since we have just upgraded Riverbend with some dedicated bike lanes, let's use some of the empty space down here and try to add these. Now these have a, yeah, like I said, very distinctive look. So I guess you either hate or love the design. I don't mind, and I think by now I'm just kind of curious to try out everything. Including the bicycle parking area. This one is also interesting looking. Let's see, is there any place that makes sense? Maybe by the park here? Wouldn't be too bad. Just gonna disable some snapping. See if I can place it right next to the park. Yoink. Yeah, I mean, that is a simple asset, but very functional. Quite a few parking lots or spaces, whatever. As we're about to wrap up this episode, this is an overview of all the bike infrastructure we've managed to place down thus far, and I'm pretty happy with the final result. I think the most interesting aspect though is going to see how restricting use of non-bike infrastructure is going to affect overall bike traffic. Because while people might want to prioritize specific bike infrastructure, they don't necessarily have to currently, and we can see that very, very clearly if we enable the bicycle traffic volume. Because as you can tell, Ashford Street, I hate this street, this 4-lane avenue here is seeing a ton of bike traffic. Of course, it has 4 lanes of traffic, so that also enables a bit more traffic, but it doesn't have any dedicated bike infrastructure. The 2 roads next to it though actually does. So at least currently we can assume that unless we restrict Ashford Street directly or implement a restriction district-wide, people might sometimes prefer the actual dedicated infrastructure, but lots of people are just not going to care. So as the final experiment, we are going to enable this bicycle traffic restriction policy. Then we're going to move into the great UI edition right here. We're going to enable bicycle traffic volume, maybe disable some of this other stuff we don't need, and then we're going to speed things up and see how it all evolves. Okay, so what does this all tell us? I think first off, it is an indication, to me at least, if we are to trust these colors, that enabling the forbid biking policy doesn't technically forbid people in the sense that they can't utilize non-bike infrastructure. So I think it works kind of the same as with the traffic AI in terms of like having dedicated public transit lanes or even, you know, pedestrian only quote unquote streets, meaning that if the traffic deems that they can't reach their destination within a reasonable amount of time without breaking the rules, they will. With all that said though, it's pretty clear that this policy did have an effect, because a lot of traffic has moved from the street, which may not be named anymore, to Camellia Street and Dunhaven Street respectively, because these were just orange before. This part of Dunhaven Street was slightly purple, but it's now a pretty thick purple, and Camellia Street it's turning black down here even. So that's a positive change. We're obviously also seeing a ton of changes out here in Riverbend, but that's of course just by virtue of adding an actual network. Can't help myself but to just check up on how many people actually break the forbid biking policy rules throughout the city. Well, I mean, oh man, oh, I didn't take a look at these fellas. They just don't care. I mean, that's interesting. I wonder if is it because they can't make like a 2-step crossing, like move straight and then make a left, or how does this work? That wouldn't excuse this behavior. This is wild. I need you guys to obey the law. And what's up with all the U-turning here? It's pretty odd behavior as well. Maybe that was... that's the first crossing they can make to utilize the underground bicycle parking hall. Okay. That's fair, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's fair. You can cross here because they can't drag their bikes on the sidewalk, even though that would probably be a nice feature as well. Anyways, speaking of, let's do a check up. 370 parked bikes, so we're actually getting there. That's really impressive. And looking citywide, we only have a 15% available capacity. This is turning into like a proper bike city. My complaining aside, I'm not completely opposed to the concept of rule breaking in this game. It does add a sense of realism, I feel. If anything, this probably just highlights the lackings of this bike network I've implemented. I really don't provide these people with any other option but to make a U-turn here to utilize the parking facility, and we probably have similar situations throughout other parts of the city. I have to say though, I don't fully understand how this color gradient thing works for bicycle traffic volume, because judging by this, I would assume it also tries to predict future demand to allow you to upgrade this segment of the street, but it doesn't state that in the tooltip. It very clearly says that it indicates the number of bicycles using the carriageways and dedicated bicycle lanes and paths. So going by this, I would assume that there's plenty of bike traffic alongside the avenue, but there's none. There's not a single actual cyclist moving up and down this avenue. There's a few regular bikes with engines and all, but no cyclists. I think the overall conclusion though is that this is just a fun new system, a fun new set of functionalities to play with. And for most of it, the integration with your existing city fabric and how it connects to existing pathing and all that stuff seems to work wonderfully. And there's, of course, a visual satisfaction in seeing the added complexity and all these new cyclist commuters throughout your city. Just one more tiny observation, but I think one issue might be that if you have a situation like this, where you essentially have a T-cross with dedicated bike lanes enabled on 3 of the 4 roads, then these bike lanes don't cut through the actual crossing, which means that none of the bikes utilizing this dedicated bike lane can actually turn left. They have to enter the vehicle lane to turn left, and it's the very same case over here. So I bet you that Edward Diaz is going to make a left turn, because otherwise he'd just stay out here in the dedicated part. I am just so clever, huh? Anyways, I see that as a bit of an oversight. I hope we can get that fixed. No more observations, no more bike nerdiness. I think my brain needs a rest, and I imagine yours does as well. Thank you guys so much for watching and all the wonderful feedback on the previous video. I hope to see you all in the next video. Goodbye.